Hello, scholars. Welcome to Westward Expansion, lesson number 9. Before we jump into our work on today's lesson, let's do a quick review. Question number 1. What was a reason pioneers began moving west? Think about that for a moment. Maybe jot down your answer on a marker board or scratch piece of paper. What was a reason pioneers began moving west? Ready for question 2? Which states were the 14th, 15th, and 16th states to join the United States? So remember, the original 13 were the 13 colonies that became the 13 states. Do you remember the next 3 that we studied? Pause, give it a try. Press play when you're ready to continue. All right, number 3. What was the main job of the Lewis and Clark expedition? What was their main job, their main objective, the main thing they were supposed to do? Remember, press pause if you need more time. And then number 4. The vote on where to build Fort Clatsop was so important because blank. So what was the reason, right, that this was such an important historic vote? All right, are you ready to check? If you still need more time on any of these questions, press pause. The next slide is going to go over the answers. Here we go. All right, number 1, pioneers were moving west for these reasons. Hopefully you wrote one of those, right? Simply a sense of adventure. Some of them had heard about and wanted to use that rich soil, that rich farmland they were hearing about. And others just wanted to start over. They wanted a fresh start in their lives. And yet others were hunters and trappers. They went there for the hunting and trapping. Number 2, the 14th state was Vermont, the 15th was Kentucky, and the 16th, Tennessee. Question 3. The main job of the Lewis and Clark expedition was to find an all-water route across the continent of North America, right? This alleged Northwest Passage. Now, you might remember they found out there was no such route, but their job initially was to try to find that route. And number 4, the vote on where to build Fort Clatsop was so important because both Sacagawea and York got to vote. Even though in the United States at that time, women, indigenous native people, and African people, right, enslaved people, whether enslaved or now free, could not vote. Yet Lewis and Clark allowed every member of the expedition to vote on where to build that camp. All right, let's get going on today's work. So today, we will learn about how the land in the southwestern United States became part of the United States of America. Take a quick look at the map on the next slide to see how that section is the final section needed for the U.S. to complete what it believes is its manifest destiny to own all the land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. So, in its quest to fulfill its manifest destiny, it had claimed all of these spots, right, that you're seeing red check marks at, right? This brown section, remember, is when they broke away and won their independence from their mother country of Great Britain. Right? The Louisiana Purchase, right? They had gained Florida from Spain. We heard about Texas breaking away from Mexico and then eventually joining the United States. And our last lesson, right before this one, how this section, right, became part of the United States, avoiding war with Great Britain. That leaves for us scholars this section in circled in red. That's the last section needed for the US to fulfill its manifest destiny, to own all the land from the Atlantic Ocean over here to the Pacific Ocean over here. Let's today hear the story about this section of land. Ready to get started? All right. So, this section of land that we were just talking about all relates to the border between Texas and Mexico. So, this area right along the Rio Grande River, while the United States avoided a war with Great Britain over the Oregon Territory, which we learned about in the last lesson, they did end up going to war with Mexico over what President James Polk said was a border disagreement. So, that area that we're talking about, right? This disputed area in this darker purple, right? It's a border disagreement about where the border between Texas and Mexico is. So, really, in this argument, James Polk, the 11th president of the United States, was actually eyeing California and New Mexico, wanting those pieces of land, not actually so much concerned with what was actually the border between Mexico and Texas. Now, President Polk did at first offer to buy California and New Mexico, but when Mexico refused, he planned to ask Congress to declare war on Mexico, whether or not any fighting had happened. So, scholars, you have to understand something about this. So, in his quest, I'm going to back this up a moment. He is eyeing right this area and some of this area. And he asks to buy it. Mexico says no. So then he approaches Congress about declaring war. Because in the separation of powers in the three branches of government, only Congress can declare war. So he needs to seek that out from Congress, right? He himself, as president, cannot declare war. So he's all set to ask Congress to declare war. Before he can actually do that, though, word came that fighting had actually happened on American soil. At least that's what Polk said, even though it was not officially American soil. It was the section of land that they were arguing about. Well, he was then able to go to Congress and say blood had been shed on American soil, which of course brought Congress to action to declare war. So, war was indeed declared between the two countries. And in the war, the Mexican armies kept getting defeated. Eventually, in the fighting, America took over Mexico City, Mexico's capital. From there, the war then comes to a close. And in the peace treaty that ended the war, Mexico gave up almost all its land in the southwest part of the current United States. So, this area circled in red. In return, the United States paid Mexico just $15 million. So, scholars, not probably the finest moment in President Polk's run as president, right? That he wanted to buy California and New Mexico, kind of this area, kind of this swing of land right here that he wanted. It wasn't yet the three states. But in his quest to buy that and then not getting his way, right? Mexico said no. He then thought of another plan of how he could get that land, saying there was an argument over here, right along this Rio Grande River, about where the border was between Mexico and Texas. That's where the fighting was happening, that he then used to convince Congress to declare war. A war that then they fought and won so that they could get those pieces of land that he wanted to buy. So, quite devious. Now, once they have that land, right, let's take a look at its quest to fulfill its manifest destiny. Now, the US has claimed all of these land holdings marked in red. All except this little chunk, kind of in this salmon color right here. Now, we're going to talk about that little piece of land. Right there, circled. The US wants this one more little area. Now, perhaps you're thinking, oh my goodness, that is taking this quest for manifest destiny a little too far, owning all the land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, including this little piece section right here. Well, let me tell you why. That piece of land becomes known as the Gadsden Purchase. It is named after James Gadsden, who was the U.S. ambassador to Mexico at the time of the purchase. Now, again, you might be thinking, why does the U.S. want that little land? Well, the land was wanted by the United States so it could build a transcontinental railroad connecting the southern states to the Pacific Ocean. They wanted it so badly, scholars, they purchased that little chunk of land for $10 million. Now, today, that same little chunk of land would cost $260 million. So, this should tell you just how badly the U.S. wanted that land, that little piece of land, so that they could build this transcontinental railroad. Eek, indeed. So, again, just giving you that comparison, when the United States bought the Louisiana Territory, this whole chunk of white on the map in this blue triangle, right, $15 million. Then to get this little piece over here, they spent $10 million to get that little piece so that they could build the Transcontinental Railroad. Quite an expensive purchase. So, we today have learned how the land in the southwestern United States became part of the United States of America through another war. Declaring war on Mexico, really by deception, to get that land that it wanted to buy, to which Mexico refused. All right, your assignment is to open the attached Google form, answer the 5 questions about today's lesson. Remember, you may look back at the lesson, check out the slides again, right? Look at the pictures, the maps, listen to information again if you need to. Please remember, click the submit button at the bottom of the Google form and then turn in your assignment. That's how your answers get sent to your teacher. Thanks for joining me, scholars. We have one lesson left in our study of Westward Expansion. See you then.